Welcome to China Unveiled. Today we're diving into a seismic shift in global trade with our video, The End of WTO. Let's explore how President Trump's tariff initiative is reshaping the world economy, word for word, as we unpack every detail of this transformative moment. On August 1st, the first phase of President Trump's tariff initiative reached a significant milestone. The results indicate that the United Kingdom faces the lowest effective tariff rate at 10%, followed by allied nations such as the European Union, Japan, South Korea, and Israel at 15%. Emerging Asian economies like Vietnam, Malaysia, and Thailand are subject to rates ranging from 19% to 20%. India, due to its ties with Russia, faces a 50% tariff. Canada, embroiled in a trade dispute with the United States, is at 35%. Myanmar and Laos, steadfast partners of China, face a 40% rate. Brazil, leading the BRICS summit, is also at 50%. China, as the world's largest trade surplus nation, bears the highest tariff rate of 55%. This US-led tariff framework is poised to define the international trade system for decades to come. While some countries' tariff rates may adjust through negotiations with the United States, the overall structure is largely established. Through bilateral agreements, the US has positioned itself at the core, categorizing nations into distinct tiers. Countries aligned with U.S. values generally enjoy tariff rates below 15%. Those with potential to become significant U.S. trade partners face rates between 20% and 25%. Nations with strained relations with the U.S. are subject to 35% to 40%, while those with fundamental conflicts of interest face rates exceeding 50%. As of August 1st, the World Trade Organization is effectively obsolete. The multilateral global trade system and economic globalization have formally concluded. Many argue that President Trump's new trade system has disrupted the international trade order and hindered global economic integration. However, this US-led restructuring of the global trade framework has likely averted what could have been the most catastrophic economic crisis in human history. I am neither an advocate nor a critic of President Trump. Today, I will examine the significance of this new international trade system from the perspective of economic theory and evidence. In economics, supply and demand form a complete cycle that drives economic activity. Human society's economic progress has always been shaped by the interaction of supply and demand, either reinforcing or restraining each other. When demand exceeds supply, shortages and inflation occur. When supply surpasses demand, surpluses and deflation arise. Before the Industrial Revolution, low productivity meant that demand consistently outstripped supply. Inflation was the norm, and many wars were fought over scarce resources. The Industrial Revolution transformed this dynamic, dramatically increasing humanity's production capacity. This not only resolved supply shortages, but also led to surpluses. The global economic crisis that began in the United States in 1929 was a profound deflationary crisis. The capitalist economic crises observed in Marx's time were similarly driven by oversupply and insufficient demand. The 1929 deflationary crisis signaled the limits of relying solely on increased supply to fuel economic growth. After World War II, Western societies, learning from the Great Depression of the 1930s, adopted Keynesian demand management to regulate economies, fostering growth by stimulating demand. A key component of demand management is ensuring that more people have both the desire and the means to purchase goods. Consequently, wealth redistribution became a central focus of governance. The high welfare systems in developed nations such as Europe, the United States, Japan, and Australia emerged during this post-war period. These welfare systems helped balance supply and demand, ushering in a period of prosperity after 1946. This enabled numerous countries such as Japan, South Korea, Singapore, Taiwan, Hong Kong, and post-Soviet states like Poland and the Baltic nations to join the ranks of developed economies. Thus, the current global economy represents the most prosperous era since the advent of industrial civilization. However, as global economic integration progressed, the seeds of economic crises began to accumulate rapidly. Since the Industrial Revolution, the primary cause of economic crises has been deflation triggered by oversupply, driven solely by growing wealth inequality. Economic theory posits that the creation of supply should naturally generate corresponding demand. For instance, bakery workers produce bread and need to consume it themselves. Their wages enable them to purchase bread, creating consumption. The bakery owner's profits are also spent on goods and services. If the distribution of profits and wages between the bakery owner and workers is equitable, both parties save an appropriate portion of their income, and the remainder fuels consumption. Savings deposited in banks become credit and investment demand, which combined with consumer spending, balances supply. If consumer demand falls slightly short, governments can use fiscal deficits to restore equilibrium. However, if the bakery owner's profits vastly exceed the workers' wages, this balance is disrupted. The owner's excessive profits are not reinvested in consumption, but are instead saved, transferred abroad, or converted into foreign currency, gold, Bitcoin, or other assets. This imbalance, where supply exceeds demand, triggers a deflationary crisis, a direct result of unequal wealth distribution and extreme inequality. In essence, industrial civilization has driven supply capacity beyond demand growth, with the gap representing the wealth of the affluent. The more evenly distributed a nation's wealth, the stronger its demand, and the healthier its economy. Conversely, the greater the wealth disparity, the weaker the consumption, forcing the nation to rely on other countries to absorb its excess production to sustain growth. Without this, it risks prolonged deflationary crises. China's political and economic system exacerbates wealth inequality, making it the world's leading contributor to deflationary crises. Under the previous global economic integration framework, nations worldwide suffered from China's product dumping, which China relied upon to maintain its economic growth. This dumping has two detrimental effects on recipient countries. First, low-cost Chinese goods flood markets, undermining local manufacturing, increasing unemployment, and deteriorating economic conditions. Second, these cheap goods drive down prices, causing deflation and stalling economic progress. China's trade surplus grew from tens of billions of dollars in the 1990s to nearly $1 trillion last year, surpassing any nation in history. As China continues to expand its domestic production capacity, many industrial goods now far exceed global demand. If China were permitted to exploit global economic integration for unchecked dumping, a global deflationary crisis would emerge when worldwide demand could no longer absorb China's output. Such a crisis would be the greatest economic disaster in human history, leading to widespread unemployment and potentially sparking global conflicts over trade imbalances, resulting in profound human tragedy. Within the WTO framework, global integration was powerless to curb China's trade dumping. Its unchecked capacity expansion would inevitably drag the world into a deflationary crisis. The United States, as the world's largest importer and absorber of China's dumped goods, is uniquely positioned to counter this. Other developed economies such as the EU can at best manage their own supply-demand balance. Nations like Japan, South Korea, Taiwan, and Singapore, though developed, remain export-dependent due to excess supply. As the world's largest buyer, the U.S. has now reshaped the international trade system. The Trump administration, using trade deficits or surpluses and global political dynamics as a foundation, has introduced this new trade framework. Within it, China faces the highest global tariff rate of 55%, a fitting designation. Even excluding the 20% tariff related to fentanyl, China's tariff rate for the U.S. remains 35%, more than double the 15% applied to most nations. This system is explicitly designed to counter China's capacity dumping. The U.S. recognizes that curbing this dumping is essential to averting a global economic crisis. Tariffs that prevent China's excess capacity from flooding foreign markets are the most effective solution. To draw an analogy, consider a forest fire. Firefighters prioritize creating a firebreak to protect unaffected trees, containing the blaze within a defined area. Even if the fire consumes everything within that zone, the broader forest remains safe. President Trump's tariff system has established a global economic firebreak, safeguarding the economic security of most nations. But what happens to economies in the fire zone beyond this protection? Consider China's photovoltaic industry, a cornerstone of its new quality productive forces. According to Reuters' analysis of Chinese public filings, 5 leading solar companies, JA Solar, Tongwei, Trina Solar, Longi Green Energy, and Jinko Solar, cut nearly 90,000 jobs in 2024, representing 31% of their workforce. July data from the China Photovoltaic Industry Association indicates that since 2024, over 40 major solar firms have gone bankrupt or been acquired, with industry losses in 2023 exceeding 430 billion yuan. Though the solar sector is only 10% the size of China's real estate industry, its 2023 losses match those of real estate, reflecting the ongoing economic downturn in China. Imagine China's solar industry with capacity far exceeding global demand, dumping equipment worldwide without restraint. The impact on clean energy industries in other nations would be devastating. At that point, workforce reductions of 30% would not be limited to Chinese solar firms, but would affect clean energy companies globally. Even before President Trump's new tariff system, China's solar industry was struggling. With 55% tariffs now in place, what lies ahead for China's overcapacity industries? The outlook is likely clear to all. Thus, President Trump's tariff firebreak genuinely protects the global economy. China, as the source of global overcapacity, remains in the unprotected fire zone, vulnerable to the ravages of deflation. Confronted with this tariff barrier, the Chinese government has only one path to economic recovery: addressing the root cause of excess supply, extreme wealth inequality. Yet this inequality is not a natural outcome of market development, but a consequence of China's elite exploiting an authoritarian system to amass wealth at the expense of ordinary citizens. Will the Chinese government be willing to address this disparity? Thanks for watching and joining us on this journey to unveil China's many layers. If you found this video insightful, please give it a thumbs up, share it with others, and hit that subscribe button to stay updated. See you in the next video.